Okay, starting with the ones Jake gathered ahead of time. The first one is, how do you make sure that an iOS and Android wallet will be available on day one of Babylon? Well, you just submit them early. iOS, we have a mainnet ready wallet, which is already approved, and we can flip the switch on. We'd like to get another version out that has a couple of, little UI cleanups and stuff. But if Apple does not approve that in time, we do have an iOS one already ready to go live. And Android goes out this week. Google historically has never taken more than 1 day to approve anything, so I'm not worried about that one. What's the status/planned route for verifying code against deployed contracts? How can a project prove that the code published matches the contracts deployed? So the Rust to WASM compilation is not deterministic. It is dependent upon your build environment. There is a very long-standing issue with the Rust core team, and they have responded saying that they would like to make it deterministic, independent of code environment, but it is not resolved. So the only way to achieve this at the moment is to have something like a Docker image where you say, here's my build environment, here's everything I did to do compilation, you can repeat it yourself. We certainly want to get to the point where there is an official recommended environment to use for that process. And of course, that would have to be versioned as things like Scrypto versions change and all that, so you can verify things that published in the past. But as of mainnet released, we don't have anything like that. If you wish to have your code be verifiable, then build it with such an image and say, this is what I used and these are the steps I used to do my build. Obviously, this is the kind of thing that as you reach maturity, you start getting where things like, the Etherscan equivalents start agreeing on, this is the process to get verified, this is the image to use, and you get your little green check mark on verified source and that sort of thing. So for the time being, you'll have to roll your own. And beyond that, we know this is a concern to have an endorsed process to do so. Next few questions are around the gateway. First is, will we get a query to list all holders of a resource from the gateway? No, you will not. This is something that, the way the gateway is architected, that's a very laborious answer to produce. If you ran your own gateway, you could query that from the database. It's not something that the API is going to support. Do we expect Gateway API to have a real-time streaming element in the future, if at all? So this is something like, hey, I would like to connect to a WebSocket and subscribe to events on this component or something like that. We know that's very interesting. We do plan to have it on some form of the gateway at some point. It might not ever be on the freely available gateway service for everyone because WebSocket connections are limited. They are resource intensive. I don't know the answer for how that will all shake out. We know it's interesting. It might be the kind of thing that you might have to, once it's available, it wouldn't be available on the free gateway in the worst case. And then another large question on Gateway, which I'm not even going to ask the question. I'm just going to summarize what's going on with gateways. That will be easiest. The gateway, as it has gotten further along in development, is at the point of it's serving too many masters in that we have wallet needs, we have dApp developer needs, we have people who want to do their own aggregation services with feeds that come off of Gateway, and basically it's too difficult to optimize for all these different use cases. And so one of the most important things for the Gateway team to do, in addition to, of course, maintaining what we have at release, is to resolve this tension of too many demands on the Gateway as far as what can we do well in the Gateway. And I don't know how that's going to shake out. My expectation is we wind up with different flavors of Gateway that might be some kind of shared basic understanding of the low-level state, but have different aggregators and different databases that they're deploying to, tuned for different query things. This is one of those areas that we intend to, we're going to get more data in with Babylon Live to see how it's being used and what are the demands on it and the wallet's demands and the needs of application developers. And we will explain our thinking with the gateway in Discord as we're going through development to say, like, these are the things that we see being the priority. So there's definitely a lot of work to do there. The gateway is, there are going to be down the road some amount of change too. There's not just going to be one universal gateway that serves all needs. But I don't have a timeline for that other than to say that it is a very high priority after launch to get into this thinking. Okay, I think that covers gateway stuff. Let me scroll a bit and make sure I'm not missing one. And no. Next question is, are the fees for storage already final? Final is a very strong word. You can think of it always as, let's talk for now of like what ships at Babylon. Our expectation is that the fee table on RCnet 3.1 is what's going to ship at Babylon. As we have more learning, as we have real-world use cases in use, the fee table is a thing that changes over time. It's something that you do very carefully. The desire in general, in fact, the way we did everything was to simply benchmark very thoroughly what's the actual work time to execute operations, and that's what the fees are based upon. The idea being we would start everything with what's its real cost, and if later certain things need to be incentivized a little bit or disincentivized, we can make adjustments, but the baseline for all fees is how much work does it take to execute an operation. Also related to fees, cross-component calls are relatively expensive, and instead of encouraging modularity and composability, this rather leads to more monolithic builds to save fees. So all those calls are set on what the compute it costs to do them. The entire goal here is that fees are always low enough that optimizing for small things like that isn't necessary. This is another area of learning. If it turns out that cross-component calls need to be optimized to be cheaper, that's something we can look at. I don't know what without the data in front of me, which we won't have till we see real use, we won't know if that's an area to target to try to reduce the cost of. The overall goal is that you are not doing things like you do on Ethereum where you're trying to burn every last little bit of fees off of it. Have limitations and specs on the wallet message field been ironed out? So there's the message header on the transaction. The answer is that the way it works, as far as what the header structure is finalized. The wallet itself at 1.0 release is not going to support encrypted messages, nor do we have the documentation out yet on how to do that. It's only plain text, which hopefully you can use Radix Engine Toolkit and the like to do. We know that documentation is needed for the how to do encrypted messages and how that works. There's a little bit of understanding you have to get. It's basically goes into what are the components that are involved in the call. There's a metadata field to look for what keys should be used for doing the encryption if you're interested in them decrypting it, and it's thought through, but is not fully documented yet. Next is there any more information regarding upgradable components and blueprints? And the answer is the same as we've been giving, which is we know this is something we're very interested in. We have had a few design sessions on this. There is no more information for now, and anything that is released ahead of the possibility of upgradability, you can be secure in knowing that anything you call isn't going to change later due to the existence of updates coming into existence. You are safe to develop against anything that's deployed. And if you need upgradability right at first release, then I suggest you use one of the patterns that people follow on other networks to do so. And last one of the... Oh, sorry, two more. One is, do we expect bigger syntactical changes at Mainnet Babylon release? No, we don't. There is one optional one around key value stores, which I'll let David speak to, since he has just been in the thick of it and I have not.
Yes. So this relates to storage of schemas for non-fungible data and for key value stores. Basically, we can save quite a lot of WASM size if we change how exactly the schemas are stored behind the scenes. And that will be an optional thing you can do when you create non-fungible resources or create key value stores. Quite a minor change to the current syntax, which will enable you to save a lot of code size if you did that in all the places where you're currently creating key value stores and non-fungible IDs. So non-fungible resources. Sorry. So yeah, that will be released. There'll be docs on this released alongside the last version of Scrypto, which we'll release alongside a node release sometime in the next week or two. Back to you, Russ.
And then last one is, what are you hoping to squeeze in by mainnet? This is just a time of stabilization and small optimizations and the like, so there's no exciting new feature to announce, I'm afraid, which hopefully is a comforting thing at this point. And with that, we are through with all the ones we had prepared ahead of time. I see the chat's been active.
Had a couple of questions, two advantages in the chat. We did have a question from Attila. Will account rename be available on Android and iOS wallet apps?
Yes.
Not sure what you're referring to.
Yeah, so if you create an account within your wallet and you name it My Savings Account, can you tap Edit and change the name of it? Yes, you can. Jake, you want to take over official question reading, and then I'll just...
Yes, I'm going to be question filtration. Will there be any issues with the validator's owner address being on a Ledger device or a delayed Ledger app update that would cause an issue with validator transition to Babylon? You may need to read that one again in the chat.
Yeah,
will there be any issue with the validator?
So just to provide the context here, the process of migration from Olympia to Babylon takes the validator's owner address, which is a thing that you can specify, which basically says, where do I receive, my fees and my where do I stake from to show that I have staked to my own validator. At the Babylon migration, the badge that controls the validator component that's created at the migration goes to that address. So the question is, what if that address is on a ledger? So the answer is that that's not a problem as long as a ledger app exists. And I will just tell you right now the state of the ledger review. They have actively done review. We have received an instruction to explicitly enable the option to not review the whole manifest, to literally turn on blind signing for ledger only, where you just have approved transaction. You can look at it in the wallet, but they are requiring that change to go in before they will launch it for developer mode. We are putting that change in this week. I expect that we will have a ledger app ready for development mode in time. This is a good point to remember that we will give you an update as soon as we do have ledger approval. And if you're getting to a point where you are uncomfortable as a validator with that and you want to change your owner address to a softer one, just to be sure, you'll be able to do that.
All right, perfect. Zygo, will we get easy bot creation libraries anytime soon for liquidations or I guess oracles? Maybe more of a partnership question to be announced post Babylon.
I couldn't parse the Jacob accent on that one.
Okay, let me go again with something a little bit more reasonable.
I'm just looking for it. Here we go. I found it. Easy bot creation libraries for liquidations oracles. We have no intent to release anything. There's no new tools coming for the network for V1.0. If your needs are not met by Radix Engine Toolkit and the various flavors of it, that's always what we'd like to hear, what features you're interested in. But the main tooling is there's no new ones planned to ship, and our focus immediately after mainnet and immediately before is on getting more example content out based on the tools we already have. As we have, over time, a lot of the examples have become stale. The documentation has become stale, and some of the example things like to get you up to speed on the learning journey. And the focus is on example with the tooling we already have.
Perfect. David, would you like me to read out Florian's question, or are you replying in the chat? So you're vigorously typing.
I was typing to OLC. Yeah, read out Florian's message.
Alrighty. Is it on purpose that the updating state is not much cheaper than inserting state? This kind of incentivizes people just to insert without thinking about general network growth. Also, if I remember correctly, updating lots of values is a key value store cost, basically the same than one entry. On the Ethereum, inserting state is much more expensive than updating existing state. I might just leave this questions over to you guys. I feel like I'm just reading them to you. You just read them and answer them yourself. I'm just doing a bad job of it. So I'm just going to leave it with you guys.
Yeah, and all these things are just based on actual costs. This is something that we can look at in the future. Don't expect for any changes for that for 1.0 release. This is one of those areas to review in the fullness of time and seeing how things are used. OLC, what? Blind signing on Ledger, that's bad. I mean, they have the requirement. If they say do it, by the way, this is an optional thing. You won't have to turn this on. Oh, I see, David, you were answering this exact question. But basically, our recommendation will be there's now going to be what's called verbose mode, and you can leave that on, and it's going to show you the whole manifest. Absolutely recommend you do that so you can verify exactly you're signing what you expect. This is a requirement from Ledger that we turn on the ability to let you skip that process if you want to, and of course we will do so as it's their store, not ours. Got to end of questions already. Who else has one they want to add? Little known talent of Jacob when we have delays in the all hands meeting is he hums elevator music for us. How do you fit the manifest text on Ledger display? The answer is with a lot of scrolling, if you have a one-line one. This is one of those things that we're hoping they will see as a great thing for things like Ledger Stacks, where you get a big display. You could just see the manifest on there. So I'm expecting they'll be delighted with it once they fully appreciate all the workings of Babylon. But at the moment, we're just trying to get through review. I do want to add that when you are connected to Ledger, you still have in your wallet, like on your mobile phone, you still can see the nice summary, and you can tap over to advanced mode and see all the lines. So you can do that comparison very easily with what's on the device and what you see on your wallet as well. A question on is this basically asking if am I able to reuse a component address? No. So basically what you're asking on this, if let's say you have a bug in your deployed Scrypto component and you want to do a new one with the same address and keep all the same state, this is what you're asking for is upgradability. We know this is interesting. This is a very nuanced issue because obviously you have to make sure that you don't create a situation where people who controlled components can break anybody who calls them, who might have hard-baked that call into their own component and break them. So the design is all about how do you balance these needs. So people want to do upgrades, and their consumers want to be aware of what is the extent to which things can be changed so that they can opt in or opt out to using that component. But again, this is all the part of the design that's ongoing. Yeah. Florian, this is what's that, Dave?
I was going to say, in the meantime, if you feel like you may need to update your application, you may need to design it in a way which could support that. So, for example, there are some options that include things like storing your assets in a very simple component like an account, or even a component that stores the resources separate from your business logic. So you can potentially swap your business logic out, migrate to a new component, or there are other sort of forms you can use to take inspiration from other networks and how they do it there. But yes, as Russ says, it's not something that is still going to be baked into the system from mainnet launch.
Okay. And then one from Florian again about Ledger. Does it show the raw manifest or a slightly humanized version? Ledger, the only one that's available from the start is if you have what is viewed as a transfer transaction, in that you are only withdrawing from your account and then depositing to one or more other accounts. There is a summary view for that as a TX transfer. There are other summary ones we'd like to get in on Ledger, such as for staking or a simple DeFi transaction. Some we will get to in the fullness of time. We are very limited on Ledger. The amount of things you can do on hardware there is very, very light, and some of the logic you need to determine what kind of a transaction is too complicated to fit in the Ledger. So we'll get the ones we can get to. And there's also, again, in fullness of time, if it goes through, we may have multiple versions like, if you're on Ledger X, there's enough memory to do more of these. And so you have a different one, but all this kind of stuff we got to figure out. At the beginning, our most important thing was to make sure that everybody all the way down to Ledger Nano S originally is able to run the Ledger so that you are able to interact with things on Babylon. Over time, at some point, there could be you can't use Nano S anymore if you want to use this version of the application. I expect that comes in time. We're a half hour in and no more questions.
Any other questions? You can always find Russ, David, myself. We have a request to speak. Avant.
One brave soul.
Brave man. All right. Let's come up. See if we can come up. Oh, he's vanished now.
I pressed invite, but
Avant, come back.
He got stage fright at the last moment. You have to do step onto the stage. I see him there. There we go. While we're waiting for that, people searching for the Radix wallet in the Apple App Store, yes, we are not going to actually publish that until such time as Babylon is live. There is a blog forthcoming that explains the things that are happening, like on the switchover date and how the timelines of those things are expected to go. But you will not see the the Android application or the iOS application until Babylon is live, just to avoid confusion. For the people who aren't in this channel, will join in and then be on a test network and start importing their wallet and doing things we don't want to do.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah, cool. It was not really a question. Just wanted to pass on my thanks to you, Russ, the rest of the team, Alex, David, Omar, Jake, Brian, May, everyone I missed. To say, thanks for all the effort you guys have been putting in over the last couple of months. It's obviously been a very hard grind, lots of long hours and sleepless nights, no doubt. So just a big appreciation, thanks for myself and I guess the rest of the community for everything you've done. And it's it's obviously much appreciated. So thank you.
Thank you guys for rolling with us and for doing all this early building. We have, prior to release, the most vibrant dev community. And I know a lot of the ambassadors are not here, but everybody doing their best to go get the word out on Twitter and all that sort of thing. So it's been tremendous fun. Babylon, of course, it's hard to believe it's actually here. I'm very excited. But it's just the beginning. This is the foundation for all things, right? And we have all the more exciting stuff to do. And it'll be nice to be able to finally say to people when they're like, oh, that's all future for Radix, we'll go, no, it's out. Go use it yourself. Go write some Scrypto. It's not vaporware. Go use the wallet. It's cool. So, yeah.
Thank you, Ivan. That was
really
nice. I appreciate that. Zygo, welcome to the stage.
Oh, hi. Can you hear me right?
Loud and
Yes.
clear.
So I just wanted to reiterate on my a previous question on the verification of smart contracts. I believe it to be of extremely high priority that this is sort of provided and kept as a standard. We can self-organize as a community to keep ourselves accountable that the smart contracts deployed match the source code, but I personally would like to ask here that this is something that is sort of set as a standard and it's something that projects should follow by the Radix Works, if possible.
Yeah, this is completely our intent. It's just the time to prepare for it and do it in a way that is easy for everyone to do it, well documented, and it is versioned properly. And we've thought through what's going to happen when, there's Scripto 1.2 and what version is your thing on and how do you put that in, what repositories are acceptable, is it GitHub and GitLab, all that sort of stuff has to be thought through and then documentation done. It's completely our intent to do so. I can guarantee it's not going to be available at mainnet release.
At mainnet release, no, but when? Because
I don't know. I don't know the timeline on it.
In the next month, this would be a limitation and a possible problem for the community and early adopters. Should we put out contracts on the mainnet in the first month if it's a risk that there's the discrepancy between the source code and the deployed versions?
And that's your own decision to make. All I can tell you is that I don't have a timeline for when it will be done. We consider it important. It's our intent to do so. I don't have a timeline for when it gets done.
Understood. Thank you.
See a core API question. David, I will read it and I'll ask you to take it. In reference to the Babylon Core API, specifically the RCnet 3.1 version, how do you anticipate the stability of these endpoints moving forward? And are there any specific measures or updates planned to ensure their reliability and consistency for integrators and users?
Yeah, this is a really good question, and it's kind of quite multifaceted. So yeah, I'll touch on a few areas. So the first thing is that there is an LTS sub API, which is planned to be fully kind of forward compatible. Only sort of additions and things will kind of change there. The rest of the API, we reserve the right to make breaking changes, although in practice I think there won't be many. There will probably be some new APIs with different some new sub APIs, new sort of version APIs perhaps in future versions of the node with some changes to models and things. We also will, with new versions of the node, be expanding the sort of discriminated unions we have in the API. So, for example, if we release a new like native component, obviously we need to expand the kind of state that can be shared in the current APIs. So, we're not expecting to be major changes. If there are any breaking changes, we will flag those very clearly before someone updates their node, so they can work out how to deal with them. I expect those to be quite minimal after launch. And as I say, any larger changes will create a new kind of sub API for those changes. We are expecting to make some changes or improvements to the core API more generally. There's some new sort of paradigms you want to be able to introduce, but to sort of let you query kind of state in quite a generic, arbitrary way. But yeah, no sort of guaranteed timelines on that at the moment. The other thing that we've done is we've added in some flags which disable some of the endpoints of the core API, which might give kind of unbounded responses and things, with the goal that they could potentially be run by node runners who want to expose the API to their sort of to people who they maybe don't trust to sort of use the API correctly. But yeah, there's potentially more we can do in that area. But for mainnet launch, there'll just be kind of a flag you can use to turn off those endpoints. Yeah. Anyway, so I'm just talking about lots of things here. I hope that answers your question. If not, then let me know and we can follow up with some more details.
Okay. One more from Florian. Will the Radix Wallet 1.0 show NFT attributes as in the non-fungible data? No, it will not, unless I'm 99% sure I'm remembering correctly that that's not in for 1.0. But we know that is an interesting thing to do. There is some nuance there as far as what if you had a bunch of like deeply nested structures on there. Will you show the top level? Will you have the ability to do the raw view? We know that's an interesting thing to do, but for 1.0, my memory is that we don't have any implementation of that. If I'm wrong, then I guess it's a happy surprise. It looks like we have the end of questions again. Is Discord very aggressively limiting everyone's names for everybody else too? Like I just see F, A. Like I can't understand why some are so aggressively truncated and others are not.
You've missed the meme, I think. Everyone's taking inspiration from Jacob and shortening their name.
Oh, I see. I'm not, guys. I'm an old guy. I'm not cool. You know, I can't keep up with this sort of stuff. I'm Jacob's punching bag on this. He always tries to get me to say phrases claiming it's like a real phrase the kids say, but it's never true. He's always trying to fool me.
I don't need to bait you. You pull out that little book you carry of how to talk to kids in a tech company and like trial them out with us, and it's
I'm invincible. You can't get me.
All right. If there's no more questions, Mr. Can and A137X, shoot him through immediately. This is going to be recorded, will be distributed later, so if anyone wants to come and catch up on any of the answers or forward it through to your comrades, that'll be sent through the dev channels once it's done and uploaded, probably Friday.
We have the Jacob guarantee that the recording was successful.
No, absolutely not. Absolutely not. I've pushed recording responsibilities onto another member of staff. So if it does not work, I will put them front and center to be shot. So if you're listening to this member of staff, I hope you've done it correctly.
Okay.
Mr. Can, no, there will not.
Sent to a program. When will we have the ability to get whole key value stores, all records of at once from Gateway Core APIs? I will forward this over to David.
Yes. So this sort of relates to some of the things that Russ and I talked about earlier in the call about the Gateway and Core APIs. So it's something that's actually technically very hard to do in the Gateway API at the moment because of how it version state and things. So it's unlikely that it will come in the Gateway API anytime soon. On the Core API side, we are hoping to work on that at some point after the mainnet launch. This will be part of the change I discussed earlier about creating a more generic mechanism for querying data from the Core API. That's obviously a lot of things on the node roadmap. So I can't make promises exactly when that will turn up. But the plan is to have such an API and a Core API in the not too distant future. The one caveat to that is that the Core API doesn't have any sort of understanding of sort of the historic state, so you can only query the current state from the Core API. But for most uses, that should be sufficient for people, I imagine.
We have a last minute question coming through. Will there be an update of Omar's Python libs for Babylon? Depends which ones we're talking about. The Radix engine toolkit, we can build for Python. I believe that's scheduled to be done by Mainnet as far as an officially blessed toolkit, but I'm not 100% on that. As far as other Python libs, those are separate things that Omar does out of his own goodwill, which at the point are not an RDX Works product. Historically, Omar loves to do this stuff, so I would be surprised if he didn't continue so far of his own Python libs, but maybe it just finds the thinking what makes its way into the Radix engine toolkit. And Omar, feel free to come up on stage if you want to talk about it.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes. So what Russ said is pretty much correct. So the Python Radix engine toolkit is planned to be available for mainnet. Just very few things that we need to get working, and then publish it to PyPy. It should then be available. But yeah.
Beautiful.
And Ava, do we have a release date for the prod Babylon node build? Very soon. There's having to go to the publishing board for some last things, but obviously you are anxiously awaiting this. You will know as soon as we can tell you, but obviously it's going to be quite soon. I hope I didn't miss one there. Looks like I did not. Do we kill RCnet before the migration starts, or do we keep it for a bit longer? I mean, I'm not going to try to coordinate that same day, so RCnet, I expect, will live on for a few days after the mainnet switchover, but I don't have a hard date to turn it off.
Actually, it's worth maybe expanding on that and just doing a quick update on StokeNet. So we've
Expand away.
So we've migrated StokeNet. Thank you everybody for taking part in that sort of second test to the StokeNet migration. It was really valuable insight for us, and it shows that some of the updates and changes we made are sort of working well. And we're currently running StokeNet on Babylon right now. It's got all the imported state from Olympia on that network. However, we would quite like to basically start from scratch with StokeNet. And there are a couple of good reasons. Notable one being that we'd quite like there to be a faucet there, but because we've migrated the state from Olympia, that migration process obviously doesn't matter. Stoke had a faucet. So probably about a week before mainnet launch, we will be asking everyone to wipe StokeNet, start and install kind of the go live version of the Babylon node, and start sort of StokeNet from scratch then. And so that will can become a sort of test environment for the exact build that we're going to be deploying to mainnet a little bit before mainnet starts. And I imagine sort of community node runners will take down their Zabernet nodes at that point and move across to the StokeNet node. Scripto should be compatible between E3.1 and mainnet launch, but you should be using the latest lib that we publish anyway, which we published in next week or two. I think that's everything I wanted to say about StokeNet.
Yeah, we will. You will get new Genesis for StokeNet. It will be available before mainnet, and exact date will be coming soon. Tron, do you have one more? We're getting in at the last minute. We can never close the auction. It's always going once, going twice, and then. That was answered like a lawyer. Do you have a question? Yes. Okay, well. Never answer more than is asked. You've been well trained. Legal profession has gotten its hooks into you.
Read Jacob's elevator music.
I did that one time 3 years ago, and it's been following me around ever since.
But the reward for work done well is more work of the same kind.
Yeah, I'll take this one. So Tron's asking, can we infer the resource address for Babylon? I assume based on the old Olympia addresses. The answer is yes. There is a feature in the toolkit which can be used to deterministically work out what the new address is. There is deterministic mapping for everything but XRD, which is special cased. In fact, you can do that for resources accounts. The only thing you can't do that for is validators, or where we will, that comes out of Genesis automatically. But validator nodes will pick up that address automatically anyway, so it's not a big deal.
Okay. I actually had one more that I see getting asked a lot, and I wanted to do here. For people who have a ledger and are saying, but I don't have the same connector for my iOS device and my Android device, the ledger connects to your desktop. So it connects via Radix Connect to your phone. You will do whatever you do right now to connect it for your desktop wallet. Okay. I think we're set, Jacob. Last chance to sing.
Right. Done. I'm done. I'm happy. I'm off to the gym. Good to see you all.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
See you at Babylon release.